In Genesis chapter 38, we come to really a pretty unique passage. It's unique because the chapter before this, Genesis 37, begins the Joseph narratives. That is, the life of Joseph, stories about the life of Joseph. And we learn in Genesis chapter 37 that Joseph was one of the youngest of his brothers, and his dad favored him and gave him a coat or a robe of many colors. This was symbolic. This means that, hey, you're going to be chosen, I'm going to give you everything. Basically, the younger one there was going to displace the oldest one as being heir to the blessing and the promise. How do you think the older siblings felt? They weren't having it. They didn't like it. Joseph kept on doing what's right, though. He gave his dad a bad report, but he was honest and said, hey, this is what's really going out in the field, and they didn't like him even more. Ended up throwing him in a pit. They're all said they're going to kill him. And then one of them says, let's not kill him. Let's actually just sell him. And they sold him into slavery. And then in Genesis chapter 38, you would think that it would continue the story of Joseph, but it actually doesn't. Genesis 38 is a very unique passage because you have, right after you begin the Joseph story, you get into Joseph mode in your mind, right, when you read through the book of Genesis, and then we're confronted in Genesis 38, verse 1. It happened at the time that Judah, the whole chapter is dedicated to Judah. Why does God do this? We're going to find out, but let's continue reading. It almost seems like a detour from Joseph. It happened at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adullamite, whose name was Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He took her and went into her, and she conceived and bore a son, called his name Er. She conceived again, bore another son, called his name Onan. She conceived again, bore another son, and then named that other son too. Basically, the first 5 chapters, we really see the true colors of Judah. Now, let's back up a little bit. Once again, why is this? Joseph started. Now, if you're familiar with the book of Genesis, I would even say if you've been in church a few years, you probably know what's coming in the Joseph story. Spoiler alert here. He's going to go down to Egypt and the wife in the house of Potiphar, and then what's going to happen is Potiphar's wife is going to try to seduce him, say, lay with me. He's going to say no, and he literally runs, and then he gets put in the prison. He keeps using his gift to interpret dreams from God. He ends up being second in command of all of Egypt, and he ends up saving all of Egypt, including his family that comes to visit, from this terrible famine in the land. Basically, Joseph hits a home run early in life. So why all this about Judah? You see, it's interesting because, once again, if you've been in church a couple of years, you know the line of Christ does not come through Joseph. It comes through Judah. So Genesis 38, the purpose of this even little mini study of Judah is to explain why Joseph was chosen to be the leader in these early years and why Judah was not ready for it. Keep that in mind. This ties in, even though this chapter is about is about Judah. They all begin with J's. Even though this chapter is about Judah, it ties in with the Joseph narratives because it explains why Judah was not the one ready for it at this time. Well, first, this is a list of his sins, basically, explaining why he's disqualified from being the family leader right now. First 5 verses, Judah takes a Canaanite wife and has 3 sons. Why is marrying a Canaanite wife wrong? Well, because he's supposed to preserve the seed of the Abrahamic covenant, and the Canaanites weren't really part of it. Okay, so he messes up there. He also messes up by even departing from his family. This tells us right away that Judah, when he went down from his brothers, he turned aside. Notice that double negative there. He went down and he turned aside. There's emphasis there that Judah did not live a life that was close to his family. That's a big no-no in this time. Big no-no. What that's telling us is that Judah is a renegade. A renegade is someone who rejects formal allegiance. Well, Judah, you don't understand. You're supposed to live with your brothers. You're supposed to be with your family. I did that. That's enough. I'm going to go do it my way. He went aside from his brothers. He went down, married a Canaanite woman. So he's already has a lot of no-nos in the first 5 verses here. Let's look what happened next, verse 6. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn. In other words, this is not his wife. He's saying, hey, you're my oldest son. You need a wife. Let me find you a wife. Hey, I met this girl, Tamar. Why don't you marry her? But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. It's pretty serious. This chapter is rated R, by the way. There's a lot of stuff here. We don't know what they did, what did that was so wicked in God's eyes that God actually put him to death. We don't know. But there's a problem there because, once again, in this culture of the family, the oldest is the one that carries on the line. So the oldest one, his wife, has to have kids to carry on the line because of the Abrahamic covenant, because of the culture of the time, for all these reasons. Problem, died, they don't have kids. Somebody needs to take Er's wife and have kids with her then to preserve the line. That was the culture at the time. So Judah said to his second son, Onan, go into to Tamar, go and her wife and perform your duty and raise up kids on behalf of your brother so the line can be complete. What happened is Onan, he did something very interesting. What he did is he enjoyed the benefits of sexual relations, but he did it in such a way where he prevented any children from happening. You can read it if you like. And verse 10 now, look at it. It says, and what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also. So that leads to a big question. What exactly was wicked? What exactly was wicked there? It was not wicked that he did not have as many children as he possibly could, otherwise it was sin. That's not the point of it at all. Onan was picking and choosing which part of God's law to embrace and which part of God's law to neglect. You see, for Onan was saying, hey, he used the law to gratify his own flesh and refused to take the God-given responsibility that comes with it to raise up sons for his brother. That's what he was doing. He was picking and choosing which parts of God and which parts of the law to accept and which parts to reject. Onan was saying this. He was saying, God, if your law means I get to have Tamar, hey, I like that. But I'm not going to take responsibility to raise children. I don't want that commitment. You see, God, I want the good parts and the gratifying parts of your law, but I don't want any weight of responsibility on me. That's his wickedness in this passage. I like your law when I gain from it, but when it requires any commitment from me, I'm out. He was picking and choosing which parts of the law to embrace. If it benefited him, he embraced it. If it required any commitment, he refused. And this selfish mindset's still around today. People want religion their way. They want God their way. We live in McDonald's, have it your way. God is not a have it your way God. It's Burger King. Okay, thank you. Burger King. Good. So that's the wickedness that happens right here. How does this reflect on Judah? There's no mention of Judah disciplining his children for their wickedness. There's not even mention that he's mourning their deaths. You see, the text is purposefully painting Judah as incredibly selfish and wicked. And look what he does in verse 11. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, he said, all right, now, my first son that I let you marry died. The second son that I gave to you, well, he died. I only have one other son. You ain't getting him. Sorry. Why don't you just remain a widow? Because Tamar, he's just too young right now, and in a little bit, maybe he's just too young right now. So you just remain a widow. That's a big no-no. Now you see Judah disregarding God's law. That's what he says in verse 11. Then Judah said to his Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till Shelah, my son, grows up. For he feared that he would die like his brothers. So Tamar went and remained in her father's house. Basically, Judah is not godly at all. He actually blamed Tamar. Tamar, you're the reason why the other two died. I can't get in the third. That's exactly what's going on. So, in that scene there, Judah takes a wife named Tamar for his eldest son and then ends up blaming her and basically shutting her out. Look what happens next in verse 12. In the course of time, the wife of Judah, so the dad here, Judah, Shua's daughter, died. His wife died. So now Judah was a widower. And when Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah in his sheep shears to his friend Hira the Adulamite. Basically, he goes back to Canaan to his old friend that we were introduced to in verse 1. And when Tamar was old, when Tamar was told, your father-in-law is going on this trip. He's going up to Timnah to sear his sheep. She took off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, wrapping herself up, and sat at the entrance of this place on the road. For she said, she saw that Shelah, that is the third son, hey, remember, I'm supposed to get that son, was grown up, and she had not been given to him in marriage. In other words, Judah did not keep his word. Remember, he told Tamar, hey, wait for the younger son to grow up a little bit, then you can have. Well, guess what? He's grown up. Still didn't get it. Judah is incredibly wicked at this point. She covers herself, and she dresses like a prostitute. In verse 15, look. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. He turned to her on the roadside and said, come, let me come in to you, for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. Tamar disguised herself as a prostitute, waited on the side of the road, saw him coming, and Tamar didn't even have to do a thing. Judah is the one that says, oh, hey, let's do business. Not good at all. Not good at all. Here's her response. She said, what will you give me that I may come in, that you may come into me? Verse 17 now. He answered and said, I'll send you a young goat from the flock. In other words, I don't have a goat with me. When I get there, I'm going to shear all the sheep, remember? I'll send you one. She said, okay, but if you give me a pledge until you send it. In other words, she's saying, I require a down payment. That's what she's saying. Verse 18. He said, what pledge shall I give you? She replied, notice the emphasis here. Your signet and your cord and your staff that is in your hand. That is repetitive on purpose. You see, she did not want a down payment. Oh, just give me this much money. No, she didn't want anything neutral. She said, I want some items that are unique to you. Your signet, your rod, your staff. All those repetitive things are very important. So he gave them to her. He went under her. She conceived by him. Then she arose and went away, taking off her veil. In other words, from her point of view, mission accomplished. I'm pretty sure she's probably confident that she's conceived now, and she simply just wants to carry on the line. Is that too much to ask? That's basically her attitude. So Judah refuses to allow Tamar to carry on the family line and hires a prostitute, not knowing that it was actually Tamar in disguise. He refused to give his other son to Tamar. He hires a prostitute, gives this prostitute his personal stuff. It belongs to him and him alone, and everybody in the region knows it, right? Then he gets there from verse 20 to 23. Basically, they said, okay, here's the goat. I'm going to send a servant. Go and find her. Give her the goat and get my stuff back. Okay, well, they go, hey, have you heard? Where's the prostitute? Where's that person, that lady that was here, everything? Oh, we don't know what you're talking about. There is none here. We don't know what you're talking about. And he comes back and says, listen, they don't know what you're talking about. And I'm going around asking about a prostitute. This doesn't look good on us. Why don't we just let her keep that stuff? And let's just let her keep that stuff. Let's keep the sheep, and let's just forget about it and move on. That's exactly what happens in the next three verses. And then look at verse 24. about 3 months later. Now, what happens around 3 months after you get pregnant? You know, a lot of pregnancy pictures, especially if they just recently announced they're pregnant, they're not showing at all. But how do you know if they're pregnant? Even though they're not showing yet, right? That's what they like to do. There's nothing wrong with that. It's cool. But 3 months, around that time-ish, I think, apparently 3 months, Tamar could no longer hide the fact that she was pregnant. She was starting to show. 3 months later, Judah was told in verse 24, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been immoral. Moreover, she's pregnant by immorality. Look what Judah says. Bring her out and let her be burned. His own daughter-in-law. Now, is this a godly guy? No, not at all. Unbelievable. No mercy whatsoever. Look what happens. This is the pinnacle right here. Don't miss these next couple verses. You're going to miss out on everything if you miss this passage. He says, bring her out and let her be burned. Verse 25. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, that's Judah. He said, and said this, by the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. And she said, please identify whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff. Whoa, what's happening here? Now, the Bible has stories on next to each other. One mistake in reading the Old Testament sometimes we can make is thinking the stories are not related. They are related. Look at what happens here. You can see it in English. In Hebrew, they're the exact same words. Look at verse 25. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, the word sent, and she brought all of those stuff. Hey, this signet, this staff, and what is it? The cord. We'll go back a chapter. Remember when they kidnapped Joseph and put him in the pit? Remember what they did to prove he was dead? To convince her dad he was dead? Hey, let's take that robe of many colors that he has. Let's shred it and tat it up, and we'll dip it in blood. 37:31. Look at it. Chapter 37, verse 31. This is on purpose right here. The writer does this on purpose so we'll pick up the correlation. Genesis 37, should be just one page over, verse 31. And they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood, and they sent the robe of many colors and brought it later to their hand. And they said this we have found. Identify whose this is. Listen here. When Judah, this is poetic justice right here. When Judah was confronted by these things, hey, I'm sending this stuff you, identify who does this belong to? Again, he's reminded of a familiar situation. He's reminded of his own betrayal of his younger brother. Poetic justice yet again served. Verse 26. Then Judah identified them, and he confesses, she is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. And he did not know her again. In other words, Judah was not ignorant. He says he recognizes this situation. And when he looks at his garment there, at his cord and his staff, he is looking into a mirror. And for the first time, he sees himself as the wicked sinner that he really is. What a powerful moment there. And then he confesses. Ends with a few more verses. This is also important. It builds upon this correlation to Joseph right here. Look, verse 27. When the time of her labor came, there was twins in her womb. And when she was in labor, the one baby put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, this one came out first. Remember, in this time, it's all about the firstborn. The firstborn has all the rights. The firstborn has all the blessings. So especially when there's twins, they want to know, we need to make sure who comes out first, because this is super important. That one put out a hand. All right, tie a cord to it. That one came out first. Look what happened. This one came out first. And then verse 29. But as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out. And she said, what a breach you've made for yourself. So then they named that baby. Afterward, his brother came out with a scarlet thread in his hand, and his name was called Zerah. What is the correlation of that? Imagine Judah also. Not only, the text does this. Yes, these were apart, but we have to understand what is the message of the text when we read this. The text tells us, brings that poetic justice, and then immediately after that, the text tells us that imagine him hearing the news. Hey, you're never going to guess what happened. He may even been there. We don't know. But either way, he knows what's happened here. The older one came out. We tied a cord, and then it was actually the younger. You're telling me that the younger in my family is going to break through and displace the older? Joseph, yet again. God was teaching Judah a lesson here. He's explaining why Joseph was chosen to be the agent of blessing right here. Genesis 38 explains why Joseph is chosen to lead his family during the time of famine. It's Joseph is the one that is not in the line of Christ, but he gets sent off to Egypt to organize all of this rally in order to this huge operation in order to save all of his family and Egypt from the famine. Question, why Joseph? Judah, that's why it can't be you. Genesis 38 answers that question on why God chose Joseph for this. We can picture it this way. Imagine if in the family in this passage here, in Genesis 38 and 37 and 38, imagine if there was a job posting in the family, like we would be in the workforce today. Position, agent of blessing. We're looking for an agent of blessing. Here are the job qualifications. Possess a high concern for others. Have a humble spirit. Must resist temptation. Must be spiritual enough to discern and follow the direction of God. And there are rumors that a famine might come, so a master's degree in economics is highly preferred. Everyone in the family wanted this position. Everyone in the family wanted the position of the agent of blessing. That's why they were all mad when Joseph came out with a coat of many colors. Reuben's the oldest, probably thinking, no, that should be me. Judah's thinking, no, that should be me. They all wanted it. They all wanted it. Judah, even though he ends up with the line of Christ, as we'll see, he does not get this job. Why not? Imagine how the job interview process would go for that. Okay, Judah, we have your resume. Genesis 38 is a resume of Judah, is exactly what it is. It's his resume showing us that he is unqualified to lead his family at this time. Imagine the interview. Judah, okay, that's your name. That's a good name. All right, let's see. We're looking for this position, agent of blessing here. We see here that, you voluntarily remove yourself from the family. Ooh, that's not good. Why was that? Well, I just wanted to do my own thing. Okay, that's different. It's different. Different's not bad necessarily, even though this one kind of is. Let's just move on to the next one. Judah, you didn't care that your sons were living wicked lives? You did not love them or correct them, or you didn't even lament over their deaths? No, it's not recorded at least. Judah, you blamed your daughter-in-law Tamar for your son's deaths and refused to allow her to carry on the family line? Yeah. I didn't want the third one to die. Judah, you are also eager to engage in sex with a prostitute, and you condemned your own daughter-in-law for immorality? Judah, why do you feel like you're qualified for this position, agent of blessing? Well, you see, I'm one of the oldest in my family, and in my culture, the agents of blessing are always the oldest, so I feel like I'm qualified. Okay. Well, we have some other candidates to interview. Well, we'll get back with you, Judah. Judah was rejected. His resume, his character, he's not fit to lead his family. Now, you notice this. He did say he had a brother. Judah, you have a brother? Yeah, his name was Joseph. I mean, you don't want to really talk to him, though. Why don't we bring Joseph in? All right, go find him. Joseph, come on in. Yeah. Joseph, you didn't apply for this position of agent of blessing, but thanks for taking the time to meet with us. You brought an honest report of your dad, to your brothers. Wow, that was hard to do, but it was the right thing. He's like, you did that? He's like, yeah, I just felt it was important to tell the truth. Joseph, you wore the robe that your dad made you because you didn't want to dishonor him, even though you knew your brothers were going to hate you. Yeah, I felt like that honoring my dad is important. Okay, that's a bonus. Joseph, you have dreams and God speaks to you in your dreams? Yeah. Wow, this guy's spiritual enough to discern the direction of God. He's a humble spirit. This guy meets the qualifications, so he doesn't have a master's degree in economics for the famine that's going to happen. But that was a bonus anyway. Joseph, you're hired. Joseph, you are the agent of blessing. But I didn't even apply for the position. That's exactly why you're hired. Basically, that's what Genesis 37, 38, and 39 is all about. Listen here. It's not a coincidence here that Judah willingly engages with a prostitute when what happens in the next chapter in Potiphar's house? Joseph refuses to lay with his wife and runs. Not a coincidence. These are all right next to each other. It's showing us who is qualified to lead and who is not qualified to lead. Joseph got the job. Joseph was hired to be the agent of blessing. There needed to be an agent of blessing to manage the whole operation in Egypt coming up and to save their family and many others from this famine that's coming. Great. What does that mean to us? In 2023 at Central Baptist Church, what does that mean to us? It's super important for everybody here. Because whether you realize it or not, if you have accepted Jesus Christ, if you are a born-again believer, you're already an agent of blessing. God has already enlisted you. You already hold that position of an agent of blessing to others. God saved you for his glory, and he commissioned you to be an agent of blessing to others. You are God's agent of blessing. So it could be summarized like this. Since God has called you to be an agent of blessing to others, you should demonstrate selflessness as you fulfill his purpose. Since God has called you, you can put your name there. Since God has called you to be an agent of blessing to others, you should demonstrate selflessness as you fulfill his purpose. If you're a believer, whether you realize it or not, you're already on the job. So maybe you need some on-the-job training today on how to be an agent of blessing. Here's one way. Here's one thing that you can put in place to have some on-the-job training. If you are to be an effective agent of blessing for God, you need to embody. I had to look this word up. I had to find a good word. I don't like using complex words. This was new to me. Dictionary.com says it's only at a third grade reading level. Embody philanthropy. Embody philanthropy. Philanthropy is a concern for the human welfare and advancement of others, usually marked by donations or actions for needy people. That is the one thing Judah does not have at all, that Joseph displays, that Judah does not. Judah was selfish. Everything you see him do in Genesis 38 is for himself. Judah was all about the best life for himself. And if you are to be an effective agent of God, an agent of blessing, that God has commissioned you to be a blessing to others, you need to embody philanthropy. See, your primary concern should be because out of your gratefulness that God has blessed you, let that overflow and bless the lives of others. Who's the last person you've blessed? Who? What was the last time you went out of your way to be a blessing to somebody else? Judah was rejected here because he embraced a life of self-indulgence. He was given to self-gratification. He was a lone ranger and he did it his way. But God has planned for his people to be agents of blessing, is to dedicate their lives to the well-being of others. So embody philanthropy. Be a blessing to others. When is the last time you helped someone in such a way that it cost you something significant? Is there a time in your life when you can say, I think there has been a few moments that at least on a few occasions I've embodied philanthropy. You've sacrificially cared, whether it's given or provided an action or been a blessing to somebody else. You see, the person that gets chosen for this job to save all of Egypt, he's not getting much out of it himself. They're doing it for everybody else. Sure, he gets to live in the palace and be second in command, but listen here. God needed somebody from this family to put in charge to save all of Egypt from the famine coming. He needed an agent of blessing. He needed an agent of blessing. So maybe, if you get nothing else from this, maybe if you can't think of anybody, maybe you need to leave here and you need to find somebody significant or somebody insignificant that you can bless in a significant way. How are we going to make an impact for the gospel in the world today? How? The gospel? Absolutely. Absolutely. But also to be an agent of blessing by embodying philanthropy, by loving others, encouraging others, sacrificing to enable others. In 2022, Forbes ranked the largest U.S. philanthropist organizations. The top 5, number 5 was Direct Relief. This was just last year in 2022. Number 4, Salvation Army. Number 3, St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Number 2, United Way. Number 1, Feeding America. And I was pleased to see that there were many Christian organizations on the list, including number 4, Samaritan's Purse. Amen. Operation Christmas Child. Number 50, Christian Broadcasting Network and Operation Blessing. Number 60, Young Life. But I'm afraid that list was missing the world's biggest philanthropist organization, and the one Jesus founded is the local church. Jesus founded the church as the world's biggest philanthropist organization, and he has commissioned you to be an agent of blessing to others. That's why we exist. Impacting neighborhoods and nations. We're not talking about just fixing houses, although we can probably do that. I don't know if we've ever done it before, and giving money to nations. We're talking about being a philanthropist and loving people and helping people and meeting their needs and giving them the gospel is the chief way. But sometimes we'll give people the gospel over and over, and they need to experience some genuine Christian love to soften up their hearts. You see that in the New Testament. You see that in the life of Christ. Embody philanthropy. It should not be what you do. It should be who you are. Joseph ended up being a blessing to his own family, but also many that did not know God in Egypt. Think about it. Think about this. This is difficult. Egypt is the place of the hub of Christianity right now in this passage. No, it's not. It's full of idol worshipers. And yet, you know what Joseph did? Well, all this grain that we're storing up, this is only for the believers. You guys are on your own if you don't believe. Oh no. Oh no. If we think of helping people as only helping other Christians, we're missing the mark. We're missing the mark if we think of it like that. Joseph blessed idol worshipers. He did not encourage them to do that, no, but he blessed people that did not follow the same faith he did and provided food for them during the famine. You know how many people Jesus fed on all the countrysides that ended up walking away from him? Do you think Jesus knew they were going to walk away from him? Oh, yeah. He fed them anyway. He fed them anyway. So go and find someone to bless. Make it your mission to bless others. And join a church that is actively involved in blessing their community. A church can have great worship services, but if a church is not blessing their community, they're missing the mark in the mission. We need to do everything we can to help everyone we can in our community with the goal of sharing Christ with them. Not talking about neglecting the gospel. No, the gospel is the chief way we help people. But often, sometimes we think that's the only way, when maybe God wants to use your sacrificial action and wants to use you to be like Christ, like a philanthropist. We can't do a lot of the things Jesus did, but we can be a blessing to them, and God will soften their hearts from it. He wants to use you to do it. That's why we're doing New You again this summer. That's why we're hosting the block party in the community. That's why we just finished the Good News Club for the year. That's why we're sponsoring another church plant. This is why we exist. The world's biggest philanthropist organization is the local church that Jesus Christ founded. So embody philanthropy. Embody it. Here's some more on-the-job training. Embrace humility. Embrace humility. Judah's confession was the turning point in his life. Something happened in verse 25 and 26. Let's revisit that. Look at it with me again. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, "By the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant." And she said, "Please identify whose these were, the signet ring, or the signet and the cord and the staff." Then Judah identified them and said, now listen here. Then Judah identified them and said, he didn't think. This was public. He said this out loud with others around. This was a public confession. He didn't say, "Oh, I felt bad inside." No. That word "said" is very significant. He said publicly, "She is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son," and he did not know her again. He publicly confessed his own sin. Maybe there's some people that won't accept your gift because you have other dealings with him that you need to confess first. Maybe in order to empower our humanity, maybe we need to settle some accounts. Embrace humility. You see, that right here is the turning point in Judah's life. Before this verse, 25 and 26, before this reminder, when he gets that look in the mirror at his own thing, "Whoever belongs to this, those are mine." When he sees himself for the sinner that he is, he publicly confesses, "I've sinned and she's more righteous than I." Judah is never portrayed as selfish again in the narratives of Genesis. Every time he's talked about, ultimately, this was the point of his salvation, and we could probably consider that. After this is the turning point in Judah's life. After this public confession, when he's confronted with his own selfishness, with his own self-absorption, with his own lifestyle of self-gratification, he publicly repents. He publicly confesses. For the first time, he embraces humility. And then, as we read on, and we'll get to all the Joseph narratives in the coming weeks, we're going to see Judah prosper. We're going to see him eventually have the line of Christ in his life, and he will be a leader in his family because he ended up embracing humility. He publicly confessed before others his own sin, and he's only portrayed positively from the remainder of Genesis. That's the turning point in his life. because of the confession and repentance that took place in Judah's life here, he would go on to be a great agent of blessing within the family. He would go on to be a great agent of blessing to the nation because out of the tribe of Judah is the source of Israel's leaders. And he would go on to be the agent of blessing to the world because the Messiah, the Redeemer, Jesus Christ, would come through him. So embrace humility. You want to be an agent of blessing? You can't do it being proud. You got to come low. You got to see yourself the way Judah saw himself when he was presented with those garments. Whose do these belong to? Those are mine. You're more righteous than I am. Embrace humility before God and embrace humility before others. So we heard about the greatest philanthropist organizations, right? But who's the greatest philanthropist of all time? Well, Forbes has a list for that too. It was published in 2018. These are the top philanthropists who have given away the most money to causes that help other people in 2018. Number 5, George, is it Soros? Correct me if I'm wrong. Number 4, the Walton family. Number 3, Michael Bloomberg. Number 2, Bill and Melinda Gates. Number 1, Warren Buffett. That's a good list. At least they're doing some things to help other people. But you know, there's somebody else that Forbes missed in this list also. The greatest philanthropist of all time is Jesus Christ because he embraced humility by becoming man, and he embodied philanthropy by giving himself on the cross for the well-being of all of humanity. Jesus Christ is the greatest philanthropist that has ever lived. He gave himself to enable salvation to be available for anyone. Oh, he did some other things too, by the way. He healed the blind. He fed the hungry. He caused the lame to walk. Question, could Jesus have went to the cross without healing the blind? Could he have went to the cross without causing the lame to walk? Could he have went to the cross without feeding all the people out in those fields? Sure he can. He was the Son of Man. He was the Son of God. Same thing, different titles, same thing. Sure he can. But he did not neglect the work of blessing others, what we would call philanthropy, because he knew that was going to empower his message. That's what the church needs to do today. He gave himself on the cross so you can be forgiven of sin and have a relationship with God. He didn't just die on the cross. He's still in the work of philanthropy today because he rose from the dead and he is still in the philanthropy business today. And whatever problems you have and whatever messy life you've had, I promise you this, you probably don't have a messy of a life as Judah here. But God can save somebody like Judah after his confession, and if he can use him and be an agent of blessing to others, I can tell you this, he has a plan for you and he can use you. You can find that help today. Many people go to all these other philanthropist organizations. Are we keeping it real here in the church? You can find those organizations everywhere. Be sure you do not go your entire life and get help from everywhere else and miss out on the greatest help you can get, not because there's a famine coming, but because there is a fire coming for all who reject Christ. You need Jesus. He died for you. He rose for you. Since God called you to be an agent of blessing, you should demonstrate selflessness as you fulfill his purpose. Imagine when we embrace that and continue to embrace that, imagine how the Holy Spirit will empower our witness out in the community. That's my prayer today. Is it yours?